There's a specific kind of childhood that never gets talked about because from the outside it doesn't look like a problem at all. You were 8 years old, standing in the kitchen, and one of your parents was falling apart. Maybe it was a fight that wouldn't end. Maybe it was a bottle. Maybe it was just a silence too heavy for a house that small. Nobody says anything to you directly. Nobody has to. Something in you just quietly decides, without ever using these words, if I don't hold this together, no one will. You just quietly stop being a child years before you're supposed to, and nobody ever tells you that's what happened. This is the psychology of a child who grew up too fast, and the strange part is, most people who lived it don't even know they're still living it. Maybe you don't remember the exact moment. Most people don't. It's rarely one event. It's smaller than that. A parent who couldn't hold it together, a house where the mood shifted fast enough that you learned to read it before you could read a full sentence, a silence that meant something was wrong long before anyone explained what. And somewhere in there, without ever deciding it out loud, you understood one thing. If you didn't hold this together, no one would. That's the ache underneath all of this, and it's rarely named directly. You weren't just handed responsibility too early. You were handed the feeling that your own needs came second, every time without exception, until second stopped feeling like a ranking and started feeling like the truth about your place in the world. Psychologists have a real term for what happened here: parentification, when a child ends up carrying emotional or practical responsibilities that were never supposed to belong to them. Researchers have studied this for decades, and what keeps showing up in that research is that what looks like maturity from the outside usually isn't maturity at all. It's a nervous system that learned very early that calm is something you have to manufacture yourself because nobody else in the house was reliably going to. That's the first pattern: early responsibility. Somewhere around the age most kids are worried about a spelling test, you were worried about whether dinner would get made or whether tonight would be a bad night. You got good at this, genuinely good, reading a mood before it turned into a fight, filling silences that felt dangerous, managing something too big for a person your size because the alternative wasn't really available to you. That leads straight into the second pattern: survival independence. You learn fast not to need things out loud. Asking for help starts to feel like handing someone a weapon, so you stop asking. You get praised for it constantly, so mature, so responsible, so independent, and you take the compliment because what else are you going to do with it? But here's the truth underneath the compliment. You might be praised for your independence when deep down you're terrified of being a burden. Nobody ever said those two things were the same thing. They just felt like the same thing for so long that you stopped checking. The third pattern is guilt for needing attention. If you ever did ask for something, comfort, help, just someone to notice you were struggling, some part of you flinched like you were taking up space that belonged to someone else's crisis. So you learned to want less, out loud. Not because you needed less, because wanting less was safer than wanting and not receiving. The fourth pattern is uneasy rest. Stillness doesn't feel peaceful to you the way it's supposed to. It feels like waiting for something to go wrong. Productivity became the only state that felt earned, so rest quietly turned into something you have to justify, or something that sneaks up on you as guilt disguised as tiredness. And the fifth is what I'd call split maturity. You're remarkably capable in a crisis and strangely uncertain about ordinary softness. You can handle a real emergency without blinking, but being playful or careless or unguarded for no reason at all feels almost foreign, like a language you never got taught. Before you turn any of this into another reason to be hard on yourself, here's the thing worth saying clearly. None of this was a flaw in you. A child doesn't choose to grow up early. A child adapts to whatever keeps them attached to the people they depend on, because attachment is survival at that age, full stop. What looked like maturity was never really maturity. It was a very young person doing the only thing available to keep the house standing. So what do you actually do with all of this now?
as an adult who's been running this system for 20 or 30 years without ever being told it had an off switch. If you've lived this way for decades, the question isn't how you stop overnight, it's what healing actually looks like. There are really only two honest paths through it, and neither one is quick. The first is grieving, not performing sadness, actually grieving for the version of your childhood you didn't get, the one where you could have been messy, loud, inconvenient, and still fully loved, the one where a bad grade or a spilled drink or a tantrum in a grocery store could just be a normal Tuesday instead of one more thing to manage. That version of you deserved to exist. Saying that out loud doesn't make you ungrateful for what you did have, it just makes you honest about what you didn't. The second is learning to receive. This is the harder one because it goes against everything the earlier version of you learned to survive. It means letting yourself rest without earning it first. It means being taken care of without having done something to deserve it. Someone just choosing to show up for you, cooking the meal, asking how your day actually was, with no invoice attached. For a long time, receiving probably felt more uncomfortable than going without, because going without was familiar, and familiar always feels safer than good, even when it isn't. Learning to receive is slow, and it will feel wrong at first, almost rude, like you're taking something that isn't yours. It isn't. It was always yours. You just never got handed it on time. Here's the line I want you to actually keep out of everything in this video. Your maturity was never the problem. The problem was that you had no choice. You were never wrong for adapting. You just never got the childhood that wouldn't have required the adaptation in the first place. That doesn't mean you're stuck being who you had to become at 8. It means the parts of you that are still on high alert, still uneasy with rest, still flinching at needing something from someone, those parts aren't broken. They're just still guarding a house that isn't on fire anymore. And slowly, carefully, you get to be the one who tells them it's safe to stand down. If any part of this described you more than you expected, tell me which pattern hit hardest. In the comments. Early responsibility, survival independence, the guilt, the rest, or the split maturity. And if you know someone who grew up the same way, send them this. Chances are nobody's ever said any of this to them either. Thank you for watching, and subscribe for more on psychology, human behavior, and the hidden patterns behind the way we think and feel.